Hello and welcome to In Conclusion, in elections. That's right, while everyone was looking for a date to be named on June 17th, the Prime Minister pulled the rug out from under us and named the date yesterday. Well, you know what they say, you make plans and the Prime Minister laughs. But first, we'll get into that. But first, we want to talk about the hottest topic of last week in a segment that I would like to call Kejan Haynes, the Michael Jackson glove of indifference is half off. See, because this week, our nation was divided by the actions of a comedian, and this time an actual comedian, not one of our politicians. John Oliver, host of Last Week Tonight on HBO, bought 5 minutes of airtime on this station, and although the address was 5 minutes, this is all anyone seemed to have heard.
Family, watch me for a minute now. What's the scene? I know you're getting to banker right now. I'll just pause for a second to allow the people of Trinidad to laugh at the whitest person who has ever lived attempting to speak Trini and instead sounding real doltish, ent.
And even though he admitted he sounded terrible, people freaked out about this. And of course, they were given free airtime to vent their frustrations.
Joke is on Jack, the joke is on all of us, and the joke is on that Jack who thinks that I was funny, coming to Trinidad and being so offensive and trying to laugh at us as a people. I don't really find it was funny. It was very offensive to me. I enjoy a good satirical piece, but when you come into a jurisdiction to laugh at the people, then you're crossing a certain line that we try to respect in comedy and in the business. You know, I wouldn't go to Barbados, for example, or St. Lucia and make fun of them as a people.
In terms of the accent and
it's crossing a line that makes it inappropriate.
Yeah, he's right. It's absolutely inappropriate and disrespectful to go into someone else's country and try to speak to them in their accent.
Greetings, massive. Hey. Wagwan, Jamaica.
I guess we forgot that we applauded that too. Listen, long story short, if you're mad at John Oliver, you've kind of missed the point. Because whether or not you thought it was funny, it's beyond the point. Because if you thought he insulted Trinidadians or Tobagonians, because at least he remembered to address them, which is more than many Trinidadians do, you missed the point. In fact, the last time the public completely missed the point and got angry, that's when they thought that this was an actual working traffic light. Listen. What John Oliver was trying to do was speak to Jack Warner on the FIFA issue.
If you turn on FIFA, do not underestimate how much people might be willing to forgive. And if one day you end up in jail and you're staring up at the ceiling, wouldn't you feel better to know that you took down some people with you? It's like they say, snitches get smooches. That's what they say. That's the phrase. That's the phrase. So please, release the documents, Mr. Warner, and you may yet salvage your completely tattered reputation.
And you see, it's not something that hasn't been said already here. For instance, if you watched the show last week, veteran journalist Tony Fraser said the exact same thing.
This is his last chance. Let's say this is his last chance. I think he stands in a position to benefit the society if he has information and if he wants to release that information, not simply as a vendetta against X or Y or Z, but for the society to see what happens in this arena of big finance and politics. He stands at the center of that. And likewise, he stands at the center of the international arena with FIFA. FIFA, as we know, is not a Sunday school organization, literally law unto itself.
And of course, not responding to that, Jack Warner responded directly to John Oliver.
A national TV station could allow a foreigner, mostly an American foreigner, to come into this country to embarrass its citizens, to embarrass our people.
John Oliver is not American, he's British. So when you think about it, going into other people's countries and calling out their corrupt leaders or whatever it is, that's kind of what John Oliver does. That's his thing. Anyhow.
I don't need any advice from any comedian fool who doesn't know anything about this country to tell me what files to release and what not to release. That is none of his business. I take no instructions from him.
I mean, at least he addressed the issue there, but then again, Jack Warner did what he does best. When his back is against the wall, he taps into public opinion and tugs at the heartstrings to drum up support. He did this again in 2012. Remember when his popularity in the government was waning? He launched a one-man campaign to bring back hanging, which he eventually dropped. Anyway, there's more.
It's not how much we may disagree as a people, not how much we may fight among ourselves. We do it among ourselves within our borders. But against outsiders, we have to stand united. We have to stand together as a people.
See, the irony of all this isn't a domestic issue. This is about as global as it gets. In fact, the only treasury Jack Warner isn't accused of dipping in is ours. And if you think about it, John Oliver insulted Trinidad. If you still think that John Oliver insulted Trinbagonians on an international stage, well, just look at the way that the international media covered the story. Not one of the headlines said that he insulted us. They all said what I just said, that he addressed Jack Warner. Now, if you can find a story that says he insulted us, the nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, send it to me. In fact, Jack Warner got harsher criticisms for his response to John Oliver. And even harsher criticism now that the composer of that way too loud track behind Warner's speech, Greg Dombrowski, he's called him out for, quote, using his music to suit his corrupt agenda. But let's get to the other agenda. Yes, John Oliver did laugh at the fact that anyone can buy airtime, but that's the reality. I mean, is it a little sad or upsetting that anyone can just buy airtime on local TV? Of course it is, but that's how all local stations make money. All. In England, the BBC, despite being state-owned, is funded by a TV tax. Yes, you pay a tax to own a working television. See, maybe we could implement that here, but since a large percentage of the country doesn't even pay income tax, good luck getting anybody to pay that. And let's be real, we all prefer to have Netflix anyway. And John Oliver himself admits that he doesn't even know how HBO makes money, so no, we can't just buy airtime in another country. So yes, it's atrocious and a flawed system. But what's more flawed is that media houses pay foreign companies to show their shows on our television, but we charge local producers to air content. I mean, we're a nation built on flawed systems. It's the exact flawed system that allows political parties, most recently the Prime Ministers on May 24th, to interrupt the sacred 7 o'clock hour, buying out news time to air the political rally. So relegating news to start at 7:45 that day when it should have begun at 7 and ended at 7:30. It's also the same flawed system that we have in the country that creates an FIU. See, because this week we found out that $10 million from South Africa was supposedly funneled through a local supermarket and then paid out to Jack Warner. So we turned to the Financial Intelligence Unit to get some kind of answer.
We are not in a position to investigate matters, the particular matters that the public is now aware of. With respect to the FIU's role in that, the FIU cannot comment on what its role was or whether it had a role at all on those matters.
And speaking of a flawed institution with a head who doesn't really comment much, the president, who, despite having a tainted head of the Integrity Commission, thought it'd be a good idea to keep him there and just simply appoint 2 new members. But he then had to hastily retreat when the opposition called him out for a lack of consultation. And speaking of retreat, President Kamona did all this before jetting off to South Africa until June 17th. By the way, Mr. President, that's my birthday, so if you want to bring me back a t-shirt, all that. The president is also expected to make a statement, presumably about the 2 resignations, but he didn't. So, listen, we understand that you, the public, hold us in the media to a higher moral standard. And you're right, media houses should be very discerning about who we associate with or who we accept money from. But unlike the country's major political parties, at least you know where our money comes from. Let's take a break for the 8 o'clock news headline.
Loud Cry Heralds presents Revolutionary Revelations with Pastor Kevin McMillan every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. A fresh look at current events in the light of biblical prophecy. You can't afford to miss it.
Tonight is the night, bright lights, high crowd, yeah, we're gonna throw down, everybody get loud. Tonight is the night, lights flashing when we step in the place, and you can feel the raw excitement from the look on their faces. The truth is you can find...
Hey WWE Universe, the WWE superstars and divas of Raw are on Mondays at 9 p.m. here on TV6. Join us every Sunday evening at 7:30 for some political hard talk. In the lead-up to the general elections, we'll bring guests with opposing political views to the set of a current affair to thrash it out. Whether the politicians or their supporters, Jabari Fraser will ask them the important questions that you'd want answers for in this silly season. A current affair where opposing politicians make for strange bedfellows. Sundays at 7:30 p.m. with repeats on Tuesday mornings at 9:30. Don't miss it. Engaging, enlightening, and a little bit entertaining. Fazir Muhammad always gets straight to the point. Join him every morning for Straight Talk on all the latest local, regional, and international affairs in TV6's Morning Edition from 6 a.m. to 8 weekdays right here on CCN TV6. Engaged couples, it's your turn to participate in the interactive competitive series Wedding Rush. To be chosen for Season 3's production, send in your entries detailing full names, contact information, wedding date, one photo of yourselves, and a brief essay on how you met, the proposal, and why we should choose you to be a part of TV6's Wedding Rush. Drop off your entries labeled Wedding Rush Entry at Express House, 35 Independence Square, Port of Spain, or like our Facebook page and inbox your entries. Deadline for entries is June 22nd. Must be 18 years and over to participate.
All right, welcome back. Well, it's almost over. The 10th Parliament dissolves at midnight on June 17th, and what a session it's been, from physically being moved from the Red House, which, by the way, we should have moved back into in 2014, to a motion of no confidence in the opposition leader, to several 24-hour-long debates. These guys have seen it all. They've logged more hours in the Parliament than they've probably have in their own homes. So with us this evening is Express political editor Ria Taitt, Newsday's Sean Douglas, and CCN senior political reporter Juhel Browne. So welcome to all of you. Thanks very much. So looking back at this session, what stands out the most for you, Ria?
Well, there are several things. One is that the Parliament seemed to have been 5 years of controversy, and it never seemed to have settled down in that sense. If you look at the personalities involved in the Parliament, the 41 members of the House of Representatives and the 31 members of the Senate, there were changes in personnel, so to speak. Often. Yes, so that you had ministers being shuffled in and out of the Senate on a certainly a more regular basis than previously. And even in the House of Representatives, you had one resignation, which left an unfilled vacancy.
Right, for quite some time. That's Dabadi O'Meara, right?
Yes. Well, it couldn't be filled because it was created in the last year of the Parliament.
Right.
There was Jack Warner also resigning and being re-elected on a different ticket.
You got Aaron MacLeod without a seat for a little while as well. Aaron MacLeod without a party, sorry, when he left the MSG.
And you also had one member being, well, I don't want to say kicked out, but Herbert Volney, we saw the unprecedented invocation of the Crossing of the Floor Act. And he lost his seat, and there were 2 by-elections in the last 5 years, resulting in the government losing 2 of those seats that it originally started out with. So it was a very unsettled Parliament.
So, Sean, and what was it like when you covering this? You've been covering this for many years, and what was it like for you?
Well, on the good side, we thank God for the new standing orders that had significantly cut the speaking time of MPs, because I mean, we've gone, all my colleagues here, Juhel, etc., have gone through ridiculous late hours, and at least there was an intent to try to rein in the speaking time, the droning on and so forth. So I would give kudos on cross-party cooperation. That was one of the victories of Parliament. And we could say that it ended on a good note. I think the Senate is, the new standing orders for the Senate, following on from the lower house, are due to come in next week, or when the Parliament, as like the day before the Parliament dissolves and so on. So that's a good thing. I would agree with the my colleague Ria here that the change in personnel was just too many. You know, I think it was 24 if you add the ministers and MPs and senators. 24 people exited during this 5-year period. And I guess that's if you start off at 29 to 12 seats, you know, if you start off with this surge, an unprecedented surge in support, you start at the top, the only place to go is downhill.
Drew, is this the first time that you've seen this much controversy with a Speaker of the House as well? Maybe he would have gotten some credit for creating the new standing orders, but there was a lot of controversy around him.
Well, there was I wouldn't say it was the first time. I think there have been issues with speakers in the past, but certainly with Mr. Mark, you know, you had the one issue outside of the Parliament concerning his tertiary education and the exam he sat. There have been criticisms from the opposition about the way in which he has been presiding over certain matters. For me, though, one of the more interesting things in this session has been the number of motions of no confidence.
Yeah, we have what, 3?
With Prime Minister, there was I think 2 against the Prime Minister, 1 against the Finance Minister. The ones against the Prime Minister literally started on one day and would go across midnight into the following day. Those were fairly interesting and not necessarily what you might have been accustomed to. Remember with Mr. Manning, when he was Prime Minister, there was going to be a motion of no confidence in him, and then he preempted it by calling the election, which the PNM lost.
Right. We have a thought from the Prime Minister. What she was talking about, everybody's been talking about the last couple weeks where everything was rushed, and what she was saying was, well, this isn't unprecedented. Let's listen to what the Prime Minister had to say.
I would invite you, and I would provide these statistics to show you that in almost every of the 10 parliaments we've had, coming down to those last few months, the legislative agenda, especially in the Senate, by the way, has been exceedingly heavy. This year has been no exception in that regard.
Do you agree, Ria? All 3 of you disagree?
Well, I think that a lot of critical legislation came in the last days, and I cannot remember that being so in previous parliaments. You normally have some housekeeping to clean up where amendments have to be approved and so on, but
international legislation that where you have to meet.
Yes, but you know, the squatters bill, the motor vehicle bill, you know, there were fundamental bills that were left too late in the day to approve.
And then campaign finance that never really made it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was just going to pick up from where Ria was actually. Wednesday, I found that the Senate leader, Ganga Singh, looked very uncomfortable because you had a situation with 4, possibly 5 bills on the order paper for the 3 days of Parliament, and with the exception of the finance variation of appropriation bill, it all fall down. And you know, you want to give credit to where, you know, you want to be balanced and say, there is a squatting, the squatting issue is worthy of debate because there are, you know, there are so many issues. MSJ leader David Abdullah said land is value.
Right.
It is a measure of value. Yet, on the other hand, you go into squatting camps and these people are not living in luxury, you know, and if we I mean, there are desperate people in this country who need a helping hand up, and the first thing of a roof over your head. Look at the mum who gave birth to the baby on the road. These people are living under a bridge, you know. I mean, so while we're doing all this tra-la-la in Parliament, there are certain people out there who desperately need help in a non-partisan way. The gambling bill, that was quite interesting because you've had gambling basically spilling out onto the sidewalks. I was passing a bar in, Bobby's bar in Currap Junction the other day, and so this roulette machine, which I know is normally supposed to be...
it just needs to be regulated, and it just kind of...
Well, the question, it needs to be regulated, and... but the society, before that happens, society has to take a decision. Do we need every single nook and cranny in Trinidad and Tobago to have these, what we call the one-arm bandit slot machines, etc.?
Julie, looking like you wanted to chime in on something there.
Well, keep in mind to remember that the issue, like for the gambling issue, for example, that was something that the last administration had came to the Parliament, went to the Parliament, the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Manningham, had made his own pronouncements about that, and then that didn't happen. Since then, the industry has grown and has boomed. But this also raises the issue of the importance of Parliament passing good law. And there, critics of this Parliament would question whether or not that has happened in the last 5 years. The government obviously would say that it did, but there are those who would wonder. And then you've seen instances where bills maybe were passed but not yet proclaimed or about to be passed and then pulled back and reviewed. I'm not saying that is unusual in the context of Parliament, but it's certainly, again, one of those things that you would take note of during this session.
I think it's unusual, the number of bills that were critical that were allowed to lapse. And if you look at many of the key pieces of legislation, the runoff bill was allowed to lapse, and they were allowed to lapse deliberately. The IRA bill, the amendment bill, was allowed to lapse.
And this is what they campaigned on.
Yes, these were critical pieces. I think it also speaks to the need for a legislative agenda, which, for some reason, governments have not been able to keep up.
So what do you blame all of this on? Lack of political will, inexperience, as some might say?
No, I think that
just
there is
wasted.
a lack of proper planning of the legislative program, and things are left. Things come in a pretty ad hoc way, and they are left for the last minute. And it's either, I think there is some element too of planning where certain bills were brought, I think, deliberately at the last minute, either to prevent too much discussion.
Okay.
Because sometimes too much discussion will raise issues.
I wonder about the number. For example, you had the St. Joseph by-election, you had the Shogunas West by-election, you had the local government election, if I'm not mistaken, all in 1 year. And then you would have had less parliament sittings because of that. I wonder if that would have had an impact on the ability of this 10th Parliament. If it didn't have those elections interrupting, maybe if it would have had more progress on certain legislative matters or not, I don't know.
But you yourself raised the number of no-confidence motions.
Which was also another interruption.
Too, I mean, that is an... If you have the parliamentary time, you can decide what is more critical to your interest, whether a motion of no confidence or the passing of a particular piece of legislation. And those are things that, we have to consider, whether the time was used in the manner in which, the population would have wanted.
Just one other point. Then you are facing the possibility of the next government, whichever party wins and forms the government, re-examining bills, and then things coming back. You may have a situation where bills are carried over into the new session.
Well, that was the next question. Is it that, can it happen?
No, it starts, it's new, it dies.
But versions of those bills could be returned.
But there is a provision, I think in the new standing orders, where there is a provision that you can resurrect some of the work that was done previously. But I just want to make a quick comment on, Ria had mentioned a couple of bills that had died off, the IRA and the ROB, runoff bill and industrial relations. Right. Actually, what I think it was is the government caved in to public pressure and the outcry, because I know the trade unionists were very unhappy with provisions of the IRA because they said that even people who are not members of the union are entitled to actually have a say in the running of a particular union representing their sector. So there was, if you go by the thing of, what is it, no representation without payment, you know. So I think they did pause on that. And then, of course, the runoff bill. You know, I mean...
And the cybercrime bill, which we bill
was challenged in court, and the previous Attorney General, Mr. Ram Logan, made, you know, much... you know, he had news conferences about victories in the court and so on, and yet that was one of those bills that died. Then keep in mind too, there was the issue of fixed date for elections and so on. All of which that was expected to have been brought to the Parliament in this session.
Well, like the Parliament, we've all run out of time, so the discussion might have to lapse a little bit. I want to thank Ria Taitt, Sean Douglas, and Juhel Browne for being on set. One day maybe we'll have an hour to discuss all of this, because I can't afford airtime to buy on TV6. All right, so that's our show. A brand new week of news begins now, and now we have the 8 o'clock news headline.